This is Bless Radio. It's Tuesday evening. This is the spiritual discussion program.
Yeah, God.
I'm Saad here in Bromley in southeast London. And I'm just checking. Gregory, are you there with me?
Yes.
Good evening, Gregory. Welcome. I assume you're in Brussels as usual. Oh, it's gone on mute again. Yes, he's there with us, listeners. It's Gregory and myself, Saad here. I'm in Bromley in southeast London. It's dark now. It's I would say, well, yesterday was snowing and Sunday. Sunday it was snowing and it was cold, and it's got much warmer today. And yeah, I would say it was just chilly. Gregory, how was it in Brussels? How is it in Brussels?
The same thing you have in the UK, particularly in London.
Okay, very good. Welcome to the show. Dear listeners, this is the Spiritual Discussion Program. The aim of the show is to introduce you to the spiritual knowledge in the light of truth, the Grail message by Abdrushin. And we have a new topic every week. The topic tonight is, what a man sows, that shall he reap. What a man sows, that shall he reap. Of course, it's a quote from the Bible, and that's what we'll be discussing tonight. You're welcome to join us with any questions or comments. The number to contact us on our UK number, it is 079 39 641 958. You can call, text, or use WhatsApp. And if you're outside of UK, it is 0044 79 39 641 958. Again, you can call, text, or use WhatsApp. I'm going to begin with, what is the Grail message? The Grail message, in the light of truth, by Abdrushin, is a spiritual knowledge of life. It offers an explanation of the world, a picture of creation on the basis of natural laws. Its lectures contain valuable basic elements as a help in life. For through the knowledge mediated, the reader is again brought closer to life and led back to God. The Grail message deals with important fundamental questions of life by explaining in a clear and logical way the automatic working of the laws of nature, the whole weaving of creation, allowing every process to be recognized, and thereby the purpose of our whole life. It is directed at the individual and speaks to the innate experiences of the human being, their strengths and weaknesses. Thus, every reader has the opportunity to discover, through the intuitive perception, if what is stated is the truth. Combining with the matter-of-fact reasoning, a complete world picture arises, where there is no separation between the visible world and the great world beyond the five senses, nor any separation between scientific and religious striving for knowledge. I'd like to give you a couple of quotes from the author of the Grail message, Abdrushin. The hearer and reader of my lectures should always work within himself, keenly probing and building bridges from one lecture to the other, as well as out into the great and small world happenings. Only then will he be able to understand the Grail message and find that it gradually shapes itself into one complete whole without leaving any gaps. Again and again, in all the happenings, the reader will come back to the basic features. He can explain everything without having to change even one single sentence. The word of the Grail message lives, so that it permits only those people who really carry the honest desire in their souls to find abundantly. All else is automatically rejected by it. For the arrogant and those who seek superficially, the message remains the book with 7 seals. And I'd like to give you one more quote from the author. I wish to fill the gaps which have so far always remained unanswered in the souls of men, and which never leave any serious thinker in peace if he earnestly seeks for the truth. So, dear listeners, just to remind you, the topic for discussion tonight is what a man sows, that shall he reap. This is a quote from the Bible, and I'll just repeat it again. Well, what a man sows, that shall he reap. So you're welcome to join us with any questions or comments. The number to contact us on our UK number, it is 079 39 641 958. You can call, text, or use WhatsApp. And if you're outside of UK, it is 0044 79 39 641 958. Again, you can call, text, or use WhatsApp. And Gregory, I just before I will go into the questions, I just want to take the quote from the Bible. It is in Galatians in the New Testament, chapter 6, and I'm going to read this from the beginning of chapter 6 to verse. I think I'll go to verse 10. So, in this title, "Bear One Another's Burdens." This is Galatians chapter 6. Bear one another's burdens. My brothers, if someone is caught in any kind of wrongdoing, those of you who are spiritual should set him right. But you must do it in a gentle way. Keep an eye on yourselves, so that you will not be tempted too. Help to carry one another's burdens, and in this way you will obey the law of Christ. If someone thinks he is somebody when really he is nobody, he is only deceiving himself. Each one should judge his own conduct. If it is good, then he can be proud of what he has himself done, without having to compare it with what someone else has done. For everyone has to carry his own load. The man who is being taught the Christian message should share all the good things with his teacher, good things he has with his teacher. Do not deceive yourselves. No one makes a fool of God. A person will reap exactly what he sows. If he sows in the field of natural desires, from he will gather the harvest of death. He sows in the field of the Spirit. From the Spirit, he will gather the harvest of eternal life. So let us not become tired of doing good. For if we do not give up, the time will come when we will reap the harvest. So then, as often, we have the chance, and we should do good to everyone, and especially to those who belong to our family in the faith. Gregory, I've sort of taken out a long quote there, just to give a context to the topic, because we are very familiar with these words, what you sow, or what a man sows, that shall he reap. And in this context that I've read, it looks like it's a brotherly or sisterly advice to humanity, how we should behave. Um, so what I want to ask Gregory, when we say what we sow, the first question it comes in my mind, what is sowing? Because this looks like a metaphorical example. Sowing is, when we're planting something. In fact, I have looked in the dictionary, Gregory, as I always do, what is the meaning of sowing, and I'll just quickly go there. But of course, it's too literal to sort of use it for what we are doing tonight. But it says here sowing, it says planting or scattering seeds in the ground. Or it also says disseminate or introduce. And it's in that regard, disseminate or introduce is talking about something in quotes undesirable. Some people say sowing confusion or doubt. It is also there. So, but let's take the word generally, sowing or sow. When we use the phrase "what a man sows, that shall he reap," does that word of sow meaning planting seed? It doesn't quite really mean that, right? What would you say is this word sowing really means?
Well, thanks for this particular question, which for many, they consider, they understand the picture or the meaning. A lot of metaphor is used just to make things a bit clearer or to abstract what that metaphor is alluding to. When one observes pictorially what it means to sow, like it's rightly said, you go out to the field and you scatter seeds. And these seeds are scattered into the soil, and then they grow. That particular scenario is peculiar to sowing, say, crops or seeds or agricultural things in the soil, in the earthly soil. So one can now imagine one sowing corn in the soil, and before too long, that particular personality will come back, and the right expectation will be he or she will reap the same kind in abundance that has been sown. So when one goes to the farm and scatter wheat seeds, after some months, once it's gone through the cycle and it's well tended, you expect wheat. You do not expect animals to come or expect houses to arise from it. So it is of the same kind, the same type. With that picture, one can go further and say there is a soil. The soil, or if we abstract that word soil, one can say it's the environment. That particular environment that we're discussing is the earthly soil. In a similar sense, in our thoughts, we have the thoughts environment. Of course, thoughts exist, for if they do not exist, how come we're able to think? So in a thought environment, there must be a form of soil where our thoughts are sown. The same thing happens when we speak. That environment in which we have sown our thoughts, our talk, the same thing happens in the other environment, which is that of the spirit, where we also sow. We sow with our intuition in there. And in all naturalness, just as you have on the earth, when you sow wheat and when it matures, you reap wheat. In the spiritual, when one sows kindness, one should expect to reap kindness. When one sows distrust, one should expect to reap distrust. This is a result of a law in creation, of the accumulation. By accumulation, one means an attraction of those things which are of the same type, or those things which are of the same species, if one may put it that way. So that reaping, or that sowing, and then subsequent reaping has, or is a fundamental property, it's a fundamental feature in nature, in creation.
Thank you for that, Gregory. There's a lot of things what you've said there, and I would like to go through that. One thing you mentioned, that there's a law of creation. You said, which is a law where there's an accumulation. And if I heard you properly, it was like you gave the example, let's say in the spiritual case, where you sow kindness and you reap kindness, and if you sow distrust, you reap distrust. And you mentioned that it's the same species, so there's quite a bit you've said in there, and of course you likened it to, on the earthly, when you sow wheat, you will expect to get reap the wheat in multiple or abundance, as you mentioned, and not something else, like you mentioned, animals or houses. Now, so it's like you're saying there's earthly happening and there's a spiritual happening in associating with sowing and reaping. So I want to understand, I know you said what you the same you what have sowed, you will reap the same. So let me just ask, let me just explore that word species that you mentioned. Does that mean species? When you say species, does it mean one is earthly and something is spiritual? Or yeah, if you can just define what is species when you said species.
By species, one is referring to kind, same type.
Right.
So when one is talking about wheat is a crop and is of a particular kind, of a particular type of crop. What one is stressing here is that when you go to the farm to scatter your wheat, you do not reap iron, you do not reap any others, but wheat in abundance. So the same kind, the same type is produced in abundance.
Actually, sorry.
Yes. That is a go on.
Yeah, just to stop you there, I notice you use the word abundance. So, as you know, we do plant a seed, and then the seed turns into a plant, and then plant turns into a harvest, multiple harvest, which is very, very interesting because it's just like one of two seeds, but the harvest is much more. It's like, and that I find it very surprising or interesting. How can it be that is in abundance, that you're planting one small, let's say, seed, and it turns into something so massive? Um, it's like a miracle.
In that case, if it's classified as a miracle, it means the processes in nature, the processes in creation, the occurrences in creation are miracles. For there has been no one who has gone as a farmer to the farm to scatter wheat, a grain of wheat or a grain of corn, plants it, waters it, nurtures it, it comes to maturity, and in the final analysis, that particular person has only one grain of corn. That was why it is stressed that it is a feature in creation. It is a feature in nature that when one goes to the farm to scatter wheat or rice, that particular person comes back to reap multiple of it, something bigger. That only occurs because we have within the process of creation or within the process in creation, that which is similar, that which is of the same type, will produce the same type when nurtured. It is not even surprising, for when any person goes out to observe growth in nature, it starts very small. Before long, it's able to attract what it needs on the soil for it to grow. That cannot be denied. And when it grows bigger. Or does it grow smaller and vanish? So, because one is dealing with nature, one must observe the processes in nature. And the process in nature stipulates that when one goes to the farm to plant a certain seed, first it must give you the same type. So you can't go to the farm to plant maize or corn with one seed, and in the final analysis, it gives you one just maize. You will find it will give you in abundance, but it has to be of the same type. In a similar fashion, when in one's reflection, in one's activities, by activities, one is referring to not only thinking in our heads, but also spiritual activities. All these activities occur in a particular environment. And within that environment, they also, as seeds, attract that which is similar. Because they attract that which is similar, we now have them in abundance. They, in the process of attracting, become stronger and matures, similarly to what one has when a grain of corn is planted.
Thank you for that, Gregory. And I just want to now move on to, you use a spiritual example of this sowing and reaping, which is, let's say, kindness will bring kindness and distrust would bring distrust. So would that also be of a multiple harvest? If you sow kindness, would that return in multiple kindness? And if you sow distrust, would that also return in multiple distrust? Would that also be the case?
That will be the case.
And because of this law of nature, because obviously planting wheat, grain, that's a physical material, and yet showing kindness obviously is not a physical material. Let's say is a spiritual material, if I can use that word, spiritual planting. So, but it works in the same way. That's what you're saying.
What is being stressed here, that in kindness, more or less kindness is a spiritual activity which manifests in an earthly environment. It manifests as a process in showing kindness to one's neighbor. By one's neighbor, it could be the forest, it could be the plants, it could be the animals, it could be fellow human spirits.
Thank you for that.
It is a spiritual activity, but that which is spiritual has, to a large extent, some earthly manifestation.
Yes, thank you for that. I'm starting to see this picture, what you're painting there. So thank you for that. Dear listeners, you're listening to Bless Radio. It's the Tuesday evening spiritual discussion program. The aim of the show is to introduce you to the spiritual knowledge in the light of truth, the Grail message by Abdushin. And if you're interested in knowing about the Grail message or getting a copy of the Grail message for yourself, you can go to this website, which is www.grailmessage.com. I'll spell that. www.grail, Grail, message, MESSAGE.com. And the topic we are discussing tonight is what a man sows, that shall he reap. What a man sows, that shall he reap. That's from Galatians chapter 6. And you're welcome to join us with any questions or comments. The number to contact us on our UK number, it is 079 39 641 958. You can call, text, or use WhatsApp. And if you're outside of UK, it is 0044 79 39 641 958. Again, you can call, text, or use WhatsApp. Okay, I'm going to just reread the quote from Galatians, so we can be more focused on that for this next bit. This is not from the same Bible. You know, you get different versions of the Bible, the different translations. So, but I will read this particular one, so we can just look at it specifically. So it's from Galatians, as I said, chapter 6, verses 7 to 8, and it says, "Whatsoever a man soweth, that shall he also reap. For he that soweth to his flesh shall of the flesh reap corruption. But he that soweth to the Spirit shall of the Spirit reap life everlasting. Gregory, when I look at these words, it sounds a bit mysterious, or let's say not very clear, if I'm honest. It's you can read something into it, but it's not so clear. So I just want to look into it. So the bit I want to check is, I'll just repeat the line, for he that soweth to his flesh shall of the flesh reap corruption. Could you explain what that is meant by these words?
Thanks for that particular question. It turns out to be very helpful. Corruption in that sense is meant as something temporary. For the flesh, the physical flesh and blood is temporary. And therefore, whoever sows in the flesh or something of that nature, that is temporal as compared to that which is sown in spirit, which is permanent or which is more permanent.
And the other aspect, which is, let's say, a bit mysterious for me, is that it says, when for that he soweth to his flesh shall of the flesh reap corruption. So I know you said it's temporary, flesh is temporary, but the word corruption, it doesn't sound very, let's say, good. It sounds, if you have something of the flesh, it's I mean, for me, that's not automatically mean that flesh means. So to me, it sounds like there's some connotation about the word flesh. So, something
well,
of the
you
flesh.
must understand that in the past, when that which is of the flesh is mentioned, it means that which is temporary. Temporal because it's not permanent. And that is why the other part was included. All right, reaping or sowing in the flesh and reaping corruption, whereas sowing in the spirit and reaping that which is more permanent. I've forgotten the overall phrase. Yes. Don't forget, these words have been translated again and again, but the picture which one should see, the intuitive meaning, when it is said that which is of flesh is being compared to that which is corrupt, it doesn't mean it is sinful. It only means it is temporary, temporal pleasures which one reaps in the flesh, whereas that which is spiritual is permanent.
I hear you there, but the word corruption, is that it's the meaning, let's say the immediate sensing of the word corruption is something wrong, something bad or evil even.
No.
So like you're yes, but you're saying it's not.
It is not. For check the initial meaning of corruption, and that will become very clear.
Okay.
It's used here as a phrase for temporal, like whatever you enjoy in the flesh is already temporal, it doesn't last for long. And so if you listen when it is used in literature, it doesn't necessarily mean it is bad. But what it means here, it's that pleasure which you derive is temporary. Whereas sowing in the spirit, that happiness, that joy which you derive is permanent as compared to as that of the flesh, which is very temporal. It doesn't last for long.
So from what you've just said, Gregory, it obviously sounds we should aim for something more permanent rather than temporary, because the temporary,
Precisely.
right, exactly, that's the obvious implication. Okay, so right, I'm gonna look at that. Okay. Just want to check, Gregory, like what we saw, we have talked about obviously physical things in terms of planting crops and so on. And then we've talked about kindness and distrust as spiritual activities. Uh, what about other actions? For example, words and thoughts. So, we do physical actions, which are very, you can see, but then there's also our words and thoughts. Are they also obeying this law of sowing and reaping? I think you're on mute, Gregory. No, did you hear me?
Yes. Could you repeat it, please?
Yes, I'm talking about human actions. We've talked about, the physical actions we can see, and then there's also, we speak words and we have thoughts. Are they also, does the sowing and reaping apply to those words and thoughts as well?
In the beginning of our discussion, one used the expression environment when one is referring to thoughts. Thoughts have an environment, that environment in which they operate. Words also have an environment in which they operate. Thoughts operate in an environment which has been conditioned by the laws of creation, an ethereal environment. The same thing with words. They operate in an environment which have also been conditioned by the laws of creation. It is not so ethereal, but it is there. So we have different environments. These environments, for one to be able to operate in this environment, one has to sort of construct one's sowing to suit this environment, as we have in our thoughts, which operate in that particular environment through which they can affect others. So, but most of these environments are not the gross material environments that most of us consider.
Now, Gregory, on this earth, if we do physical actions like stealing or some sort of crime, you can be arrested and put in jail for whatever the punishment is. But then these other things that we just talked about, thoughts and words, let's say, at least definitely thoughts, they don't even know what thoughts you're having. That you can't, there's no earthly sort of justice for that, human justice. And with the words, there may be some, but not always. So, and you've already pointed out that each of these, as a kinds of activity, has its own environment that it works in. So, and what we know is whatever you sow, you shall reap. So, with the physical actions, let's say there are physical consequences. With the consequences of thoughts and the consequences of words, I know you said it's in a specific environment. So, are there consequences, let's say, that we can and appreciate what sort of consequences there are. For example, with thoughts and words, what are the consequences of that?
It is very simple and direct to understand the consequences of words. Words which are spoken, words which are written. It is not very helpful to go into details. For the simple example of words spoken, transmitted, can cause many a revolution for upbuilding or a revolution of destruction. This can easily be shown from a few past instances of the effects of words. The same thing one will say, before I go there, words operates in gross fine matter. It is an environment, whereas thoughts operates in fine gross matter. These are details which many a person who is really seeking may, through their activities, verify for themselves that words have effects, the effects which may heal or may pull people together to commit terrible crimes. Thoughts, on the other hand, first have their impact on that environment of fine gross matter, and these thoughts wander about, sometimes aimlessly, but for one who has similar attraction to those things, maybe for that which is good and beneficial, or for that which is very bad and criminal, these thoughts will gather, and very simply, they can influence a person to go into specific directions and ensure that those criminal or those good thoughts inspire a personality to commit certain activities, which activities could be that which is good or that which is not good.
Thank you for that answer. Now, Gregory, we have, let's say, happy experiences and difficult experiences or painful experiences. When we have painful experiences, is that the result of where we have sinned?
Any experience only means one must have engaged with an activity. For if there is no engagement with an activity, one becomes insensitive with that particular activity. It means there are activities which do not affect us or which have no effect on us. Those activities which have effects on us are those activities we have opened a window within ourselves to be able to experience. In that particular case, there are rich activities which makes one joyful. For instance, many may listen to a piece of music which is beautiful. It makes one joyful. It means you are engaged in it by listening to it. There are some other activities which one might have opened himself or herself one way or the other. Notice, there must be something of the same type deep within each personality that acts as the source of an attraction. By attraction, one keeps referring to an accumulation. And therefore, when one refers to as a painful experience, it means one must have opened oneself for these experiences to come in. Painful experience does not mean it is bad. For many experience, it is necessary that some be jolted out of their insensitivity. And when one is jolted out of it, it means one becomes or strives to become awake. You all know what it is when you have to wake up first thing in the morning. In many cases, you want to remain in the same place. So it becomes an effort. But if one had been practicing this for quite some time, it becomes quite easy because there's a longing. There are other activities you wish to fulfill. So some of these painful experiences are not bad, but are meant to jolt one to become awake to one's environment.
Thank you for that answer, Gregory. It reminds me of Isaac Newton's law of every action. For every action, there's a reaction. And when you look at that, for every action, there's a reaction, you see it as a neutral thing. Not, oh, this is good or that is bad. Just every action, there's a reaction. So it's just the same like when we say sowing and reaping. You're not saying, oh, this is bad action or this is a good action. What you sow, you shall reap. It's completely neutral. The phrase is completely neutral. And I think what it is, we human beings try to attach meaning one way or another way and sort of misinterpret the actual real original phrase. We try to have our own ideas. And it shows we need to examine very objectively when we look at these things. Now, I've got Gregory, you also mentioned about this law of creation, of law of nature. So just to understand this law, it doesn't sound like a human law, because human law, somebody has to see you doing something and then arrest you and then, take the, whatever, let's say, punishment or whatever consequence of that law, it is. But when you're referring to this law of creation or nature, how is that law sort of, what do we mean by that law? How do we mean that?
May I ask which one precisely you are referring to?
Okay, so I'm saying there's a human law system, and when we talk about the human law system, we don't say that is sowing and reaping. But when you're talking about this law of creation, of which we are talking, say, sowing and reaping, I want to ask, how is it working? Is it what is driving it? What's the mechanism?
In the first instance, each personality must realize that here on earth, also in nature, in the world of matter and the world of non-matter, that there is motion. There is continuous motion. There are myriads of vibrations. So movement is intrinsic and also extrinsic. So there's movement within a body, or motion within a body, and also an external motion. Realizing that, one should know that even as a human personality with flesh and blood, that for it to continue to be alive here on earth, it needs to breathe in and breathe out. That's it's a fact. It means it needs to be able to exchange that which is necessary for its continuity whilst here on earth. That exchange between that which is internal and that which is external. As soon as it stops, it decays and it dissolves. And that most of the time is referred to as physical death. So, for the period of time in which the personality has been born here on earth, between that time and the time it departs, that continuous exchange must be there. Some may call this reciprocal activity. Without the reciprocal activity, then continuity will not be there. Here we are discussing, and we are using aspects of the technology which is available right now. And if one reflects a bit deeper, you will find that there you are in the UK and here I am in Belgium. The instruments which we use, which technology provides, is able to work because there is resonance. That word resonance is key. Of course, things can only resonate as you have in music when there are vibrations. Same kind of vibrations with carried energy. This is what is referred to in the so-called physics. So-called because 1,000 years ago there was nothing like that. But many persons already realized this. It is very well known that whoever breathes in must breathe out. That is a reciprocal action. And every creature, for it to continue to exist, must be able to exchange. So it is not a rocket science, but it's a fact. One can only build upon facts, not non-facts. As soon as a person realizes that some features are facts, again and again, then it is possible to build upon those facts. And this particular feature in creation, in nature, the first two which had been discussed, that's of the attraction of homogeneity, that is, things of the same type accumulate. And if you have an accumulation, you have things in abundance. That is why it's called an accumulation. That is a fact. And there is motion. Motion in the sense that we have a reciprocal motion. You called it Newton's laws, but there's nothing big about it because it has always been there. Or is it possible to find any human personality with flesh and blood who does not breathe in and breathe out? Whether Newton calls it so or not is immaterial. Plants exchange. Plants taking something from the soil and taking some air, gases they need, and they produce some things for us. So, in such a sense, we have an accumulation for that which is needed. Each personality only needs to reflect a bit and reflect aright. Then, many things will become very clear that indeed these discussions are simple and there are many things that one can derive from such simple reflections.
Yes, thank you for that explanation and clarification, Gregory. I'm getting a picture now that, when you talked about exchange and breathing in and out, there's a system which is like perfect and working like automatically. This, you said law of motion, it's like automatically, it's like already there, and it's just operating eternally and perfectly. And we recognize it, but maybe we don't think deeply into it, what exactly is going on, and we just take these things for granted. But if for one moment, like we say, if you reflect, you certainly and just observe these things, then you say, oh yes, that's really happening. This is something that's happening. Even if you can't, in quotes, see it literally, but you can observe the consequences of it. So yes, so there is a law. Whether Newton recognizes it or somebody else recognizes it is not the point. It's just that there is a law that we should appreciate and realize how it actually works. And again, it's like universal. So as we've mentioned already, there's things which are happening in the physical world, then it's happening in the spiritual world, and let's say other worlds in between. So it's like the same pattern being repeated in all those different environments, as you mentioned earlier. Dear listeners, I want to remind you, listening to Bless Radio. We're broadcasting on this, actually Bless Radio number 1, the number 1.com, and also we are broadcasting on YouTube. If you go to youtube.com and then on the search box type in Bless Radio 1, the number 1, and then space live stream. You're listening, and this is the spiritual discussion program on Tuesday evenings from 6 p.m. to 8 p.m. The aim of the show is to introduce you to the spiritual knowledge in the light of truth, the Grail message by Abrushin. And if you are interested in knowing about the Grail message or want to get a copy of the Grail message for yourself, you can go to this website, which is www.grailmessage.com. I'll spell that. www.grail, Grail, message, MESSAGE.com. And the topic we're discussing tonight is, what a man sows, that shall he reap. That's a quote from the Bible in Galatians chapter 6. What a man sows, that shall he reap. You can join in the discussions with any questions or comments. The number to contact us on our UK number, it is 079 39 641 958. You can call, text or use WhatsApp. And if you're outside of UK, it is 0044 79 39 641 958. Again, you can call, text or use WhatsApp. Gregory, there's something I would like to read from the Bible again for the listeners. It's going to be a long reading, but I feel it's good to have the context of it. So this is about, it's from John chapter 9 in the New Testament, and it's again about Jesus. Sorry, not again. It's about Jesus Jesus and his disciples coming across a blind man, and the disciples asked him a question about that blind man. So I'm just going to read. At one point I was going to say just read a little section, but I just feel it's got to go through the whole of this chapter just to give the story. There's quite a few points, so I will just read it. This is John chapter 9. As he went along, that's Jesus, he saw a man blind from birth. His disciples asked him, "Rabbi, who sinned, this man or his parents, that he was born blind?" "Neither this man nor his parents sinned," said Jesus, "but this happened so that the work of God might be displayed in his life. As long as it is day, we must do the work of him who sent me. Night is coming when no one can work. While I am in the world, I am the light of the world." Having said this, he spit on the ground, made some mud with the saliva, and then put it on the man's eyes. "Go," he told him, "wash in the pool of Siloam." This word means sent. So the man went and washed and came home seeing. His neighbors and those who had formerly seen him begging asked, Isn't this the same man who used to sit and beg?" Some claimed that he was. Others said, "No, he only looks like him." But he himself insisted, "I am the man." "How then were your eyes opened?" they demanded. He replied, "The man they called Jesus made some mud and put it on my eyes. He told me to go to Siloam and wash. So I went and washed, and then I could see." "Where is this man?" they asked him. "I don't know," he said. They brought to the Pharisees the man who had been blind. Now the day on which Jesus had made the mud and opened the man's eyes was a Sabbath. Therefore the Pharisees also asked him how he had received his sight. "He put mud on my eyes," the man replied, "and I washed, and now I see." Some of the Pharisees said, "This man is not from God, for he does not keep the Sabbath." But others asked, "How can a sinner do such miraculous signs?" So they were divided. Finally, they turned again to the blind man. "What do you have to say about him? It was your eyes he opened." The man replied, "He is a prophet." The Jews still did not believe that he had been blind and received his sight until they sent for the man's parents. "Is this your son?" they asked. "Is this the one who you say was born blind? How is it now that he can see?" "We know he is our son," the parents answered, "and we know he was born blind. But how he can see now, or who opened his eyes, we don't know. Ask him. He is of age. He will speak for himself." His parents said that because they were afraid of the Jews, for already the Jews had decided that anyone who acknowledged that Jesus was the Christ would be put out of the synagogue. That is why his parents said, "He is of age. Ask him." A second time they summoned the man who had been blind. "Give glory to God," they said. "We know this man is a sinner." He replied, "Whether he is a sinner or not, I don't know. One thing I do know. I was blind, but now I see." Then they asked him, "What did he do to you? How did he open your eyes?" He answered, "I have told you already, and you did not listen. Why do you want to hear it again? Do you want to become his disciples too?" Then they hurled insults at him and said, "You are this fellow's disciple. We are the disciples of Moses. We know that God spoke to Moses. But as for this fellow, we don't even know where he comes from." The man answered, "Now that is remarkable. You don't know where he comes from, yet he opened my eyes. We know that God does not listen to sinners. He listens to godly men who does his will. Nobody has ever heard of opening the eyes of a man born blind. If this man were not from God, he could do nothing." To this they replied, "You are steeped in sin at birth. How dare you lecture us?" And they threw him out. Jesus heard that they had thrown him out when he found him. And when he found him, he said, "Do you believe in the Son of Man?" "Who is he, sir?" the man asked. "Tell me so that I may believe in him." Jesus said, "You have now seen him. In fact, he is the one speaking with you." Then the man said, "Lord, I believe," and he worshipped him. Jesus said, "For judgment I have come into this world, so that the blind will see, and those who will see will become blind." Some Pharisees who were with him heard him say this and asked, "What? Are we blind too?" Jesus said, "If you were blind, you would not be guilty of sin. But now that you claim you can see, your guilt remains." Gregory, this is a long story, but very, very, how can I say, I want to say, I was going to use the word eye-opening, but what I really mean is that there's a lot being said here, and there's something happening literally, and there's something happening spiritually, and those who are, let's say, have a clarity about it, it's like easy to follow, and those who don't, it's like very difficult, and you can see why the Pharisees having a lot of problem understanding what has happened here. So I want to take it step by step, and first of all, Gregory, the disciples of Jesus asked Jesus, "Has this man sinned, or has his parents sinned?" And Jesus replied, "No, neither," just to show the, let's say, the glory of God. Can you explain that, how that was meant to show the glory of God, Gregory?
In our earlier discussion, one mentioned that the operation of these laws is such that it doesn't necessarily mean that one must have done that which is evil or one must have sinned. There are some personalities who, through their volition for that which is good, decide to take upon themselves a mission to experience for themselves what the challenges of being blind is. For them, only through such can they understand what it means to be physically blind. Because they have that strong volition, they now incarnate through a family here on earth, and therefore they are able to go about their activities experiencing what it means to be blind. For through such an experience, maybe in a further incarnation, they are able to use those experiences to make things simpler or easier for their fellow human spirits, which experience they had gathered previously. So it doesn't mean that they themselves must have been bad. That was what the master was referring to.
Thank you for that. And it is a miracle, of course, how the man could get his eyesight back. I mean, you say he put mud on his eyes. Jesus put mud on his eyes and told him to go and wash. And then he came back after that and he could see. I would say that might be the superficial happening of washing your eyes, but I would say there was more than that happening for him to be able to see. So would you say, we don't have to necessarily go deep into the experience of how exactly, like a scientific explanation, but so Gregory, is there some way that Jesus put some healing on this person to be able to see his sight, to have his sight again? Not
Actually,
again.
go on.
I made a mistake. He was born blind, so he didn't have sight in this life. So yes, just the process basically of having this healing. How was that? It's not a physical only action, right?
It must be realized that when Jesus approached that neighborhood, that he himself, the man who is physically blind, must have heard his voice and must have asked to be relieved of that particular blindness. Jesus, being him who he is, with his capabilities as a divine envoy, was able to perceive all this when this particular personality asked to be helped to have a relief, because he himself asked, and Jesus, realizing what this man is about, was able to provide first the spiritual relief and also the physical relief, which is just a simple activity for the man to perform so that the cycle will be complete. In that particular case, it sufficed for the man to go towards a place where he can then wash his eyes. Don't forget, he could not see. Maybe in the first instance, he could see just a bit when the mud had been put in his eyes, such that he could find his way to where he could wash it. And having washed it, he was able to come back to see properly. That is what is observed in the earthly sense. Of course, there are many more things that would have happened in the non-earthly. For that, one would refer many a listener to examine the work in the light of truth, the Grail message. There, the answer is.
Thank you for that, Gregory. The next part of the story is about the Pharisees, and it's quite clear they have their own view of what is a prophet and what is what they consider to be somebody who is doing the will of God. And when what they think is a prophet or somebody who is doing the will of God doesn't align with their own view or understanding, they reject and they become and the story at how it ends as we see here. Jesus says, I've come here to help those who are blind to see, and those who are seeing to be blind. And it really is a beautiful ending. How this story gives that picture very clearly. The blind man can see, and he can see, not only see physically, but he can see spiritually who is helped him, and the help has come from God. He can see this, while those who supposedly come represent God or seem to say have knowledge of God can't even see because of somehow their own let's say ideas or what they think they understand or how God is. It's really almost funny when you see this.
May I say something?
Yes, please do.
You will find at that time the Pharisees, they were quite knowledgeable in earthly affairs. And because they were clever, they, in quotes, their cleverness was that which is tied to trivialities. They were unable to recognize spiritually, and therefore they were spiritually blind. Though they could see the operations here in the earthly, but spiritually they could not see the impact of that which is spiritual on the earthly, and therefore they could not understand the operations which the Redeemer was pointing to. One can classify them as those who are spiritually blind. Although their physical eyes can see, can perceive, but it doesn't go deep enough to have an impact on their spirit where real and true recognition lie. Whereas the other man who first must have heard, and having heard the master, asked, already believed that the master is capable of providing him relief. Such must have been a certainty within him. Based on such, the master already recognized that and built upon that. So one must understand that the seed came from the person who made the requests, who made a humble request in the personal conviction that indeed the master is capable. These transactions or these occurrences only glorify the laws of creation which have been put in place. Whereas the Pharisees, they had no such seeds to sow. All that they understood was only the earthly, whereas in the spiritual, they were confused, they were blind, and therefore nothing could be done for them.
Thank you for that, Gregory. Earlier we were talking about the laws, the law of creation, and also somewhere it is said that I, your Lord, am the law. So I just want to understand sometimes, so which is referring to the Almighty. So is the Lord Almighty the law, or is that he put into this creation a law that takes effect in this creation? So just want to be clear, because okay, let me just say this to I'm going to repeat the question in a second. So because some people say, oh, God Almighty is everywhere, in the flower, on the mountain, everywhere, basically like that. And then so he's also the law? That means he's also everywhere like that, always acting in every situation? Or is it that, Gregory, that he has made the law and then the law activates everything?
It must be understood very clearly that when you have such an argument where it is said the Lord Almighty is everywhere in the flower, then the simplest question, what happens when the flower dies? Following their argument, it means the Almighty whom they claim they understand also dies. So one can not use such formal arguments. One must refer to an informal, intuitive argument, which basically is that it is the power that streams from a source, which power streams not in an arbitrary manner, but in a given manner, or one may say in a manner or in a pattern which is in accord with the will of the Almighty. It is the will of the Almighty that brings into existence these laws, which is referred to. These laws form the truth. The truth does not change. It remains the same yesterday, today, and tomorrow. That being the case, it is the way men experience the truth which changes. The way they experience it in their maturity. So it will be wrong to take their arguments because the truth remains the same. But they who experience the effects of the truth change.
Thank you for that, Gregory. Dear listeners, I want to remind you, listening to Bless Radio. We're broadcasting on blessradio1.com and also live on YouTube. So you go to YouTube and you put in the search box Bless Radio, the number 1, space live stream. And you can also listen to the recording of the show the next day on YouTube. Again, go to youtube.com and then type in there Bless Radio 1, the number 1, Bless Radio 1, and then space Grail message, and then space the topic for tonight, which is what a man sows, that shall he reap. What a man sows, that shall he reap. And if you're interested in getting a copy of the Grail message or want more information on the Grail message, you can go to this website, which is www.grail, Grail, message, MESSAGE.com. As I mentioned, the listeners, the topic for tonight is what a man sows, that shall he reap. And you're very welcome to join us with any questions or comments. The number to contact us on our UK number, it is 079 39 641 958. You can call, text, or use WhatsApp. And if you're outside of UK, it is 0044 79 39 641 958. And just to remind you, this is the spiritual discussion program, which the aim is to introduce you to the spiritual knowledge in the light of truth, the Grail message by Uprushing. Now, Gregory, we're talking about what a man sows, that shall he reap. So what I want to ask is, or you can say, there's some actions, you take actions, and then there are reactions, or actions and consequences, let's call it. And so when there's an action, there's always a consequence. And what I want to ask, Gregory, these actions, do they always happen, the consequences of these actions, do they always happen in the consequences come back in the same, let's say, one earth life, that whatever actions we have taken, or does it happen in the beyond, let's say when we pass over? Yeah, or as although we haven't talked about it today, but in the past programs we have mentioned that there is reincarnation. So do we have to be now reborn, and the consequences hit us in the next earth life? So just want to know, like, a time scale about these things. So do the consequences of our actions take place in one earth life? Do they happen in the beyond, or do they have to come back and face them in this another earth life?
When an activity is initiated, which is what you refer to as an action, that activity must be viewed in its totality. That activity must be looked at from an earthly part, manifestation, and the non-earthly part, which one may refer to as one's thoughts, or at the same time one's spiritual volition. That which has been initiated, depending on the kind which has been initiated. Like a farmer that goes to the farm and plants maize. That maize may be reaped in 12 weeks. There are some who may plant, say, a massive, just an acorn. The acorn tree may plant it, and it may take a very long time for it to grow to the majesty of an acorn tree, which may be 50, 100, or 200 years, by which time that person who planted or sowed that seed has gone. So it depends, one, on the type which has been initiated. If at that point of initiation there is a non-earthly or non-gross material part of it, which could be in our thoughts, which that one in our thoughts will mature over time, which could take many years. Or if one takes the spiritual part, if that one is taken into consideration, the maturity and returns of that one may take centuries. And when these things come to manifest here on earth, that is when it is sin. It may be that the spiritual part will manifest again on earth, maybe in 600 years. Meanwhile, that person, if that person is here on earth when it manifests, because he or she has his or her identity stamped on that particular seed which has been sown, it definitely will come back to him, such that he himself or herself will experience that which has been sown by that particular person. The experiencing, most likely, if it is beautiful, if it is lovely, if it is good, it will approach him. If in the instance he still holds that fervor, then that experience which he or she has sown, which is beautiful, will now coalesce in him, will manifest in him to bring him the kind which he or she has sown. And that is why you find there are some people, they themselves cannot understand, and they just have a sense of inner happiness and joy. That is the case for the person who has preserved that fervor with which it initiated that action. if in the returns that particular personality here on earth has changed and does not vibrate in that favor anymore, those returns will still come. But because they do not find any homogeneity, they will slide away from him or her. If, however, they find homogeneity, then it will manifest, be it in that which is good or that which is not good. That is how the laws work, impartial. And therefore, in one's activities, there are many features which brings one back in an incarnation. For many, a person sows different seeds. These seeds which have been sown are such that they are alive in the non-earthly environment. And in the returns of this, when this person needs to experience, it should be put in that environment to which he himself, through his activities, has contributed to or has been attracted to due to his volition. Such is the case with the operations of the laws of creation, that every injustice is impossible at birth.
Thank you for that, Gregory. I know you didn't go into reincarnation there, but some people think, when you have the result of your, let's say, karma coming back in your next life, could you be born as an animal or some other being, let's say? So is that possible to, as a consequence of your actions, let's say in this life, you're born as something different than a human in the next life?
In our earlier discussion with the planting of crops, we said only the reaping of crops is only possible of the same type, of the same kind. Means that maize plants or maize seed will bring forth maize seed. You also said that wheat seed will bring forth wheat seed. A human spirit, in its activity, must return as a human spirit. A plant cannot return as an animal. Neither an animal returning as a plant. An animal cannot return as a human personality, a human spirit. Neither can a human spirit return as an animal. The key thing to observe here, these are different species. And that was why at the initial discussion, one mentioned types. The person in flesh and blood, the inner core, is of type spirit. The animal is of type animistic. and gross matter is gross matter. So we have different types. And therefore, in an incarnation, one should not expect that a human spirit returning back as a stone or as a plant. However, now there are many human spirits who, through their weavings, have so debased themselves in such a way that when they now incarnate, some features have to be observed about them that make them look as if we have a chimera, because due to their activities, they have committed all sorts of activities. But that is not the purpose of today's discussion. The purpose, as we keep stressing, is to introduce many, a seeker, to the walk in the light of truth, so that they, through their activities, may examine this work vigorously and rigorously for personal clarity.
Thank you for that, Gregory. Another thing about sowing and reaping, it appears that there's, you said there's everything is a particular type. There's spirit, there's animal, and there's plant, let's say, and then there's kindness and there's distrust. There are particular types. Now, on this earth, in this world, we have good and bad people, or let's say well-off people and not so well-off people. Let's say in a material sense, maybe, if you put it that way. And it appears that the people who are in leading positions in many cases, or let's say who get ahead, seem to be, having wealth and power, but also being evil in their, let's say, their ways of, let's say, getting to power, or being in dominant, let's say. They seem to get ahead, while the more, if I can use the word innocent, or more good people seem to suffer. At least that's what we see on the earth. So I just wondering about that. Is that because you might say, because we say, well, you sow what you reap. And when you see this type of thing, you're wondering, how come such people are ahead? They're not seemingly getting what you can't see somehow justice when so-called, I will put the word evil in quotes because we can't see everything what somebody's doing, but somehow these evil dominant people seem to be getting ahead, while the so-called good people are suffering, even at their expense. So how can we see that is really, there's a sowing and reaping there, like a justice of sowing and reaping?
Well, it is a good observation to look at these things from one's own perspective. From one's own perspective, it means there is a comparison to one's own perceptions. But when one put these things not in accordance to one's own perceptions or perspective, but reference them to the laws of creation, which laws are neutral, maybe it is then possible to have a recognition which grants an overview of the workings of these laws of creation. For many look at those who are in position of authority as better than themselves. But is that a fact? For many, they only need to incarnate on earth in order to redeem themselves. So there are many who only incarnate on earth to spend a short while in goodness and service to their neighbors. Which service to their neighbors does not mean they have to be service to a whole nation, as compared to the so-called the president or the prime minister or the leader of a community who has sole responsibilities for the good of that community, which means the constituents of that community look up to the coordinator to ensure that there is peace and there is justice and there is harmony and love within that community. That community could be a local community, it could be a state, it could be a country. So, when that is in place, much is expected, to whom much has been granted. So, if you have in a community, someone needs to do the coordination, so much of understanding has to be in place. Or that particular personality along the line has been provided an opportunity to help the overall community or to redeem himself or herself. If, however, that opportunity which has been granted now to be realized here on earth is missed by non-fulfillment, then that is not the fault of him who, through his will, granted that opportunity, but is the fault of the personality who did not fulfill. So each personality must strive to do the best they can anywhere, wherever they have, through their activities, placed themselves. They have placed themselves due to their past activities, and their current strivings have now put them there. So it is not right to say because one is a president or one is the overall doctor, that person is better than myself or yourself. The personality who is a doctor, who helps to ensure that their physical body are well cared for, is of equal importance to another who tends the roads to make sure they are clean. It's of equal importance to the person who constructs a little bit of music that supports both or all parties. So it only means that in these matters, all these personalities need to work side by side. For if the street cleaner does not do his job or refuses to do the job, then there is filthiness. You are very much aware of the coronavirus nowadays. So if so much filth is piled somewhere, and many have to struggle past. They can easily pick one disease or the other because the street cleaner did not do his job. The same thing happens with the doctor, who is supposed to work out ways and specialize to help the community. The same thing one can say of the coordination of the whole nation. It only means that there are tasks to be accomplished, and there are other people who are more adjusted to helping to coordinate these tasks. So unless the personality views are right, those tasks which they themselves need to accomplish, then the likelihood is that they will ask themselves, why am I poor? Why this and why that?
Thank you for that, Gregory. Now, life is full of making choices and decisions, and so my question is, how do we make good choices and decisions? Should we talk to wise people, parents, good friends, experienced people, or should we be reading spiritual books? And what about in the world of technology today with Google? You can do research there. So how do we make good choices and decisions so we, in the context of what we sow, we shall reap?
The thoughts which one that flashes across, that people only make good decisions based on their personal convictions. And conviction come only through ruthless, vigorous weighing and examining. Vigorous weighing physically, vigorous weighing or vigorous examinations. So there is examination on the earthly matters, the earthly side. It means you have to engage, you have to take it in, you have to weigh. So you do that not only with one's intellect, but also weighing through one's intuition. Only then will arrive at certainty through personal conviction. Then one, through experience, can now make decisions. Whereas initially it was wavy, one was not sure. But through personal weighing and examination, certainty then arrives, not only intellectually, but also spiritually. Then one needs fear no fall.
Thank you for that. What about praying to the Almighty to guide and protect us? Is that also helpful?
The question one must ask, what is prayer? One must also understand that before one incarnated on earth, that things have been put in place. Oxygen that one needs to breathe. And with the certainty and confidence, one can move forward to experience. Prayer becomes a channel through which one opens oneself to that which is non-earthly, to that which is spiritual, such that one is able to experience spiritually and now ensure that the effects of one's spiritual striving is now made manifest on earth. In that case, one can look at what the Redeemer gave to men in the Lord's Prayer. It is left for many to check it up and see the type of prayer he gave that will redeem many a personality if rightly examined and rightly said.
Thank you for that, Gregory. We've come to the end of our show tonight, listeners. Hope you enjoyed the topic of what a man sows, that shall he reap. We covered a lot of different sort of aspects, and let's say we tried, it might have been touched on it rather than going deeply into everything. So as always, we urge you to pick up the Grail message and examine it and look at the explanations given there and examine for yourself. And so I again recommend that you go to this website if you want more information or you want to get a copy of the Grail message for yourself. The website is www.grail, Grail, message, MESSAGE.com. Gregory, anything you'd like to say to the listeners to say goodbye?
Well, one wishes them a beautiful week.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Same from me, listeners. I wish you also a beautiful week. And we'll be back as usual next Tuesday, 6 p.m. to 8 p.m. With another topic for our discussion. Look forward to you joining us then. All the best. God bless. Take care, everybody. All the best. Take care now.